I can barely breathe. Can you hear me?
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I think I'm mic'd up. Can you all hear me? We're going to compete with the stage downstairs, but this is the place to be. Welcome, my name's Trevor Hutchings, and I'm a partner at BIP, and welcome to Sustainable Futures. This afternoon, we've got a packed agenda for you, but my role this afternoon is really just to keep things to time, to moderate the exciting speakers and panelists that we've got, and to also cover a few points of admin. So nobody wants to be embarrassed by their phone going off, so you know what to do with that. And clearly, in the event of a fire evacuation, although rest assured there's none of that planned this afternoon, then there are clearly the exits here to make yourself familiar with, and the signs down to the lower ground floor and outside of the building. That video clip, if you could hear it above the noise, really is about this afternoon. It's about this journey to net zero and the opportunity that that presents the global economy. And we're going to hear from some great speakers who are going to take us through that. I just want to quickly run through the agenda with you so you know what to expect this afternoon, because we have got a break planned, and importantly, we've also got some networking and drinks afterwards. We're going to have a formal introduction and welcome from Roy Haberman, who is the UK CEO of BIP shortly, and he'll be joined by Dave Worthington of Verco, the MD of Verco. We're then going to hear from Laura, and I will introduce our speakers a bit more formally as we go through. We'll hear from Laura Sands, and we'll also hear from Justin Keeble from Google as two keynote speakers. We're also going to play you a little bit of a video clip before we get on to those keynotes, something to look out for there. We're then going to turn into our first panel session, where we're going to hear from those who are responsible within their organizations for driving the sustainability agenda for those businesses. What are the enablers? What are the challenges? What are the key messages for you in the audience who might also have the same challenge as they have? We're also then going to hear from a real thought leader and prominent advocate of the clean energy transition from Monica after the break. And then we're going to also have a final panel, which is very much focused around the built environment, responsible for over a third of emissions, and clearly one of those challenging sectors of the economy to decarbonise. So something to look forward to there. And then we'll also obviously have a bit of a wrap-up and a bit of a summary of what we've learned this afternoon. I think the final thing I would say before handing over to Roy and to Dave is that during the panel sessions, there's going to be an opportunity for Q&A. So please think about your questions, and of course the golden rule of asking a question is make sure it's a question. We really want to hear from as many people in the audience as we can, challenging our panelists. So that's the running order this afternoon. I think buckle up is the phrase, and I'll hand over to Roy and to Dave.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me well? Perfect. So welcome into Sustainable Future Digital Journey to Net Zero. I'm Roy. I joined the company 3 months ago as the UK CEO, and I'm responsible for taking this company into the next journey to become a really sustainable powerhouse in the next coming years. In the last 3 months that I've met many of our clients, I realized that everyone wants to do something about sustainability, from the CEO to the strategy to the operation, procurement. But it's always about aligning the team and making everyone really focused on how to make it happen. What is the business case? How can we make it successful, and where we can find the savings? So at BIP, maybe a little bit about BIP. BIP is in business for 20 years, started in Italy and backed by CVC. We are today 6,000 people around the world with offices in Italy, Spain, UK, Colombia, Brazil, and many others. And what we really want to be is to become a powerhouse in technology, moving from management consulting into a technology player. Last year, in November, we acquired Verco, and Dave is with me, the CEO of Verco, on stage, and he will share his journey in the sustainability space. But we also recently brought a team that are really specialized in sustainability in the finance space. And we have David, Johnny, Fergo here. Maybe you can say hello. So we're really double dipping our investment into sustainability, trying to really understand where are the pain points of companies to move and make something out of it, making really a big difference and saving money, but also saving our planet. So with that, I'm looking forward to see and speak to many of you during the day. And Dave, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Roy. We're very, very pleased to be co-hosting this event and also joining a bit more generally, as Roy mentioned, relatively new joiners in November last year. So, and we've come on a long journey ourselves, both as a business and on net zero. We were somewhat early adopters, established in 1989 with a mission to help the world transform to a low-carbon economy. Then upgraded to helping provide the solutions for a net zero world. I joined 20 years ago, so at the same time that BIP was founded, and actually my first week worked on a net zero building project. We've seen over the last 2 decades the market go through an initial boom with climate services growing very fast up to the financial crash. And then a reduction when we had to really focus on how to add value to businesses, how to achieve deep decarbonisation cuts. And I just wanted to share a few lessons learned from really the last 15 years. So firstly, winning hearts and minds is arguably the most important thing. Obviously, technology and process improvements are important, but top-level CEO leadership and bringing the teams along with you is my number one. Second, needing good data, and this is where the digital theme comes in. Time and time again, we see it's difficult for organizations to proceed unless they've got the fundamentals in place, good quality data, which now market expectations are approaching those of financial data in terms of quality and robustness, with technology now doing the heavy lifting, which allows us as consultants to focus on high-value add insights and supporting clients with implementation. And lastly, thirdly, collaboration. So no one organization can achieve net zero on its own. It's about collaboration with all of the various actors in the marketplace, with their supply chains, with their peers, non-profits, public sector, academia. It's a whole market requirement for people to work together. So we'll be exploring some of those topics today. I'm really proud of the impacts we've achieved at Verco to date, but excited about the much greater impacts and accelerated mission that we will achieve with BIP's greater geographical and sectoral coverage and wider expertise. So this event is an opportunity to talk about how we can harness the power of innovation, collaboration, and digital solutions to help us all achieve the common goal of a sustainable future. Thank you.
Thank you, Roy and Dave. We're just going to have a couple of minute video before I welcome Laura to the stage. Before we get on to that, though, I just wanted to thank all of our audience today, because I know you've given up a great amount of your time to join us this afternoon, and hopefully the event will be as engaging as you want it to be and can make it be. So please don't hold back and engage in the Q&A sessions. And also clearly to our speakers, who hopefully you'll agree are a really eclectic mix of experts in this area, and I'm sure we're going to learn a lot this afternoon. So thank you to everyone, and I think we're going to play a short video.
Man-made greenhouse gas emissions are changing our climate. This is in turn creating forest fires, is causing rivers to flood, is causing crops to fail, coral reefs to bleach. We are alarmingly seeing the global populations of wildlife decline, something like 2/3 since 1970. Encouragingly, solutions to these global challenges exist, and importantly, they are becoming cheaper all the time.
It's not only about how to create a sustainable future for the business and for the people, but it's about how the systems are being used, what is the best way to monetize data in a sustainable environment, how you quantify risk in a sustainable environment.
We're looking at the challenges being faced within the context of current regulatory initiatives, highlighting the key gaps and blockers to sustainability in clinical trials.
The public sector is a very large part of our economy, enormous. It's also a very varied part of our economy, ranging from policing and hospitals through to large central government departments that we know very well. Each has its own unique set of challenges. ESG is becoming more and more to the forefront of the activities we're seeing, what we're being asked to provide as a consulting firm, and also part of the DNA in which organisations within the public sector are structuring themselves, the way in which they behave, the manner in which they conduct their conversations, and the way they look at business in general.
So it doesn't matter which industry you're in, data is the lifeblood and the life force behind and underlying any organisation and its ability to deliver what it does. It doesn't matter whether you're producing a widget or delivering a professional service. The underlying requirement is data.
The energy and utility sector is at the heart of the net zero transition. They not only have the responsibility to do the transition for their own companies, but they also have to drive the rest of the sector along and enable the net zero ambitions that UK and other countries have.
In our view, the most important thing for business is to develop a decarbonisation strategy that fits with wider business objectives and takes account of the specifics of an organisation and what they're trying to achieve.
Data is like the North Star for businesses. It guides decision making within a company. We are entering an area where data doesn't just support decision, it drives them.
We need to make sure that we keep our eyes and ears open with the entire power that technology offers us, that data offers us, and keep that sustainability view all the while as we do these decisions.
Investment in net zero has been described as the investment opportunity of the 21st century, and trillions of dollars of investment are flowing into this sector. Businesses are waking up to the opportunity that net zero and wider sustainability offers. We're excited that we've got some of the most innovative businesses on the stage today to share with you the latest thinking and innovative technologies that they're deploying to tackle climate change and environmental decline.
Great. Thank you to my colleagues. Note to self, next time a makeup artist offers to powder my forehead, I'm going to take up that offer to avoid the glare. Anyway, look, wonderful. That sets the scene. I'm going to introduce Laura, who perhaps doesn't need any introduction. She is a rock star of the clean energy transition. Some of her most notable recent appointments, Laura, as you know, are as chair of the government's digitalisation task force and data task force. And Laura's got a trademark, which is the most colourful slides that you'll have ever experienced. And I'm guaranteed you're not going to disappoint. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you so much. And thank you. And it's fantastic to be here with everybody. And what's really exciting is, from what I understand, the audience is not full of energy geeks, which actually makes for me a totally different challenge. But on the whole, I end up talking to the energy sector about you, their customers. Because the energy sector is a very interesting world. It is a world that doesn't actually engage that much with customers or really understand them. So my presentation is about the energy sector serving you better and delivering you the sustainability and the climate outcomes that you need so badly. I always talk about planning from the future, and I think that we all know what that future looks like if we don't accelerate towards a deep decarbonised energy system. So here we are. We've had Claire Coutinho, we've had Jeremy Hunt here today, and they're sort of sitting here in the middle, looking at the past, being dragged by the past, and not totally yet, in my view, understanding this future of distributed energy, this future of super customer-focused propositions. A future that isn't about big is beautiful. I'm afraid I have to have Monty Python here. But blessed are the cheesemakers will become a little bit more evident as we move forward. And location matters. Your propositions and your needs as customers are going to drive the energy transition. Just to say, and Monica might want to pick this up later, this is what somebody in the energy sector said about it currently. Designed and built by engineers, bastardized by economists and marketeers, the power industry continues to deliver one of the most successful consumer confusion programs of all time. I wonder how many people would agree with that. So this looks like a picture of the future, but actually it is a picture of today, and it is accelerating. And I've just come back from Australia, where I was talking at their Networks conference, and it was fascinating. They have incentivized rooftop solar, and they, in South Australia, are now getting between 70 and 100% of their energy from you, from customers, from distributed energy assets. So maybe this is our regulator sitting in the middle, looking very, very confused. My word, the energy sector was so simple 10, 15 years ago. But we've got all these different assets, all these different processes that are starting to converge, whether it be your rooftop solar, your EV car, your corporate battery that you're using to hedge in many ways your solar panels. And we in the energy sector are moving from 400 people, they all know each other's golf handicap, by the way, to 100 million actions and assets on the system. And there is a little bit of an idea in the energy sector that this possibly could be delivered by just digitalizing the current processes. I think they've got to think again. They have to change the whole way the system is designed. And so what are these key drivers of this optimization model? Because net zero is a really interesting concept. It is not a consumption model. It is an optimization model, i.e. doing more with less continuously. And there are key drivers. This is a bit more sort of energy geeky, but we've got some system gaps. I like my fridges. The energy sector has got some parallels with the food sector. So if you think before we had refrigeration in the food sector, we lost about 50 to 60% of food. So what is refrigeration in the energy sector? So frozen food is long duration storage. Grid scale batteries, that's refrigerated warehousing. Your EV car is a bit of a flash freezer when it comes down to it. But the most important component in the food system is actually the fridge in your home. Because if we didn't have a fridge in your home, supermarkets would have to be 4 times the size they are today, and the M25 would have to have an extra lane all the way around it. So every time we put storage onto the energy system, we optimize it, we reduce whole system costs, and your EV car is potentially your storage. Your PV is your own in many ways, your own allotment. So start to think about some of these system designs. New market players. As I say, I love the energy sector, but somebody called the customer has not really existed in front of mind in the past. But now you are going to be part of the energy system because you're going to be able to deliver a huge amount of flexibility to the system, which will need your participation. It has got to become much more customer-centric. And then obviously digital transformation. And I'll sort of go a little bit further, deep dive into that. But these models of optimization exist in other sectors. And again, if we look at the energy sector, it is about 20 years behind other sectors. Just think about your mobile phone. Think about those people who are old enough in this room to remember
mainframes from IBM. What fantastic thing. We had to fit in to the system design. Once you start to get mobile phones, once you start to get PCs, the system reverses. And it's not that you don't need big energy or data assets, but they're designed around my consumption, around how I consume that data. The energy sector is going through the same transition, and we need to get there pretty quickly because your assets, your corporate energy assets will be crucial to the future. And everyone in energy says to me, oh my God, Laura, this is so complicated. But it has already happened. As I say, we're about 20, 30 years behind in the digitalization journey when it comes to, when you start to compare us to other sectors. How does DHL move product from, around the world, dealing with probably about 10 million transactions every day? How does the telco sector work? The stock exchange, you can be a day trader or you can be a very fancy stockbroker. How is it that we've created a system where a small player can engage with the market as much as a large established player? And if you look at Transport for London, talking about an optimization model, when I leave my flat in the morning, nobody knows whether I'm going to take the train, walk, get a bus. But the system has been designed around those optionalities for me. So I really feel that the deep digitalization we can learn from other sectors. But customers, as I come, you are these customers, and that's what's important for us to focus on. You're going to have to, in many ways, participate in flexibility. You don't need to know that you're going to do that, but propositions and value needs to flow to you. And this future is just around the corner. As I say, in South Australia, they're doing 70 to 100% of their energy from rooftop solar. The amount of EV cars on the system by 2035 will be the equivalent of 3 nuclear power stations. Now, should we not be utilizing those assets to build more of a system? And those people with companies who've got corporate car parks with EV charging, you are sitting on an asset. You are sitting on my metaphorical fridge. And we will have to ensure that as companies that you're taking back control in terms of your energy utilization and the potential for you to self-supply. Since the Ukraine war, we've seen a significant number of corporates who are now actually saying, we want to be much more in control of our energy supply. We don't want that volatility. And so as a result, there is a much bigger move for, in many ways, self-supply, self-generation. And also you can then manage your own carbon footprint much more effectively. And this is who you could be. Going forward, if you've got on-site generation, you can start to make revenue streams from that. You can also start to make revenue streams from flexibility. And the markets are opening up, not quickly enough, but for you to start to be part of this energy system, as long as whole system value is delivered to you. You can save money from actually being on dynamic tariffs, and how that dynamic system design can actually start to reduce your your energy costs. And then, of course, there's energy efficiency itself. But currently, some of us are really campaigning with government to ensure that the value that you should be getting from the energy system through your actions is rewarded for whole system costs, not just for the marginal cost of electricity. So I think it's a very interesting moment, and we need we need companies' voices to demand much greater response and much greater value coming to you. But this new world of complexity, and I will just do a little bit before I wrap up on digitalization. As I say, we're going from 400 people to 100 million actions and assets. And this level of complexity, the cascading of algorithms that are going to be created within the system, new business models that are going to enter very quickly. There's going to have to be some form of overarching governance and system resilience, which in the Energy Digitalisation Task Force we absolutely called for. And I think I've got a verifier here, a colleague of mine from the International Energy Agency, who says the UK is doing a lot of really groundbreaking work. We need to get that governance sorted so that the system doesn't collapse. But what I do know for certain is that the system will collapse if we don't deeply digitalise it. And this digitalisation cuts through from a customer's point of view, from a systems point of view, from a regulatory point of view, efficiency and cost reduction for all of us, energy security, and also, importantly, so that you don't get ripped off, sort of policy and customer oversight. And there are some key digital tools that are coming forward. And I have to say that both policy and regulator has been incredibly positive in terms of making this happen. You need to give your consent. There is no way that anybody should be doing anything to your energy supply, to your energy configuration, without you saying yes. And I will just leave this out there, but the Estonians are really the poster boy when it comes to customers' data and energy, and really exciting. Automated asset registration. When you have an EV car, you know you've got to ring up 4 people to register your EV car? Is that really a sensible way of living? This isn't. So we need to have auto asset registration. And we need a flexibility exchange that is open to all of you, so you can actually access the value that you've got. And this is all enabled by what we would call the digital spine. So this is what's coming soon. Oh, it's coming very soon, I am told, by DESNZ and Ofgem. But this is going to, in many ways, revolutionize how we look at energy and how you consume energy. But it is people and culture that's key to success. People within your companies that actually are passionate about sustainability, about decarbonisation. How your customers feel about you. Scope 3, when you start to look at procurement, things are starting to change quite radically, with some large customers saying that they won't procure from companies that haven't decarbonised or have a decarbonisation plan for 2030, 2035. So this is becoming very important. But the people that you recruit, and the people that you recruit to support you and advise you, is really, really important. And we do need new skills in the sector. So if you were in the energy sector, which you are customers of the energy sector, I think I would give some advice. You need to move up the value chain from being a milk farmer, which is producing an electron, to becoming a cheesemaker, i.e. delivering a solution to a customer. That's where my cheesemaker comes in. You need to be optimizing energy, not just selling you commodity. You need to look at your customer and take a totally new approach and co-create the solutions that you will need to decarbonize your businesses. And we will need to turn data into products and services that optimize the system. This is a very quick run around the energy sector, but you must be demanding more from the energy sector than you're probably getting today. You need customers, you as customers, to be absolutely at the heart of their thinking. And that is absolutely crucial for us to accelerate the energy sector's decarbonisation journey, for you to get true value, and for all of us to enable your companies to decarbonise and create sustainability strategies that turn into realities as soon as possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Wonderful. and some really hard-hitting messages there. And actually your point around digitalization, I think, is a perfect segue into our next speaker, is Justin Keeble, who is the MD Global Sustainability at Google Cloud. Justin's going to come to the stage shortly, but we're just going to play a short video, I understand.
Thank you very much, Trevor, and thank you very much, BIP, for having me today. As you heard, I'm Justin Keeble, and I lead sustainability for Google Cloud. I had 23 years in consulting, and then finally saw the light, decided that there was life beyond consulting for the BIP consultants in the room. And I joined Google Cloud about 2.5 years ago because I very much believe that data and AI, as you've heard from all the introductions, is going to be very much at the heart of solving many of the big sustainability challenges that we're facing. I want to do 3 things. Firstly, tell you a bit about Google and our own commitments to sustainability, particularly how we're leveraging AI. Secondly, tell you where we're focused in Google Cloud. And then thirdly, to just try to bring it to life with a few use cases. Does that sound okay? Be about 15 minutes. So firstly, last year for COP28, we commissioned a third-party study to look at the role that AI can play in climate change. And that report that was launched in Dubai found that as much as 10% of global greenhouse gas emissions could be mitigated through the application of AI technology. It's about the equivalent of the emissions of the European Union. Now, Google itself is now in its 3rd decade of climate leadership in leveraging these technologies. Our CEO, Sundar Pichai, has said that climate change is the greatest challenge that we face, and one that's going to affect each of us in very deep and very personal ways. Google's mission is to organize the world's information to make it useful and accessible and helpful. And that's why we're focused on these 3 pillars. The first pillar is about empowering individuals, because we have brands that touch over 1 billion users every day. We have a real responsibility to be nudging individuals to make better choices. Secondly, we need to operate sustainably. We have a big operational footprint, and I'll tell you a bit more about how we're doing that. And then thirdly, we want to use Google technologies to help you, to help partners, companies, academics, NGOs harness Google technologies to drive climate action. Now, just on the first one, just a few examples. How many of you use Google Maps? Okay, most of you. So in September, you might have seen that we've introduced eco-routing. So there we're modeling traffic flows, carbon intensity, and we're offering an eco-route choice for the user. Also in Google Travel, you might have seen now that we offer carbon footprint for the flight as well as the price. So you can make a choice based on carbon and price. Obviously, it's not just about carbon mitigation, it's also about climate risk. And at Dubai last December, we launched Flood Hub, which now runs in 80 countries around the world. And this is providing 7-day advance warning of riverine flood risk to individuals. So we send out SMS alerts to individuals if they're at risk. 450 million people can now receive that alert. And we're using AI there to model historic flood levels, river terrain, weather data to provide that acute flood risk capability. So there's a couple of examples, but there are many others. Hotel sustainability data we're now providing in Google Travel. EV charging information, again, in Google Maps. The second is operating sustainably, crucially important for the kind of footprint that Google has. That's why back in 2007, we were one of the first large tech companies to commit to what was then carbon neutral was the fashion. 2017, we were the first large tech company to match our global electricity consumption with 100% renewable energy worldwide, and we've done that every year since. But what we were finding was the grids weren't decarbonizing in the locations where we were operating at the speed that we hoped they would. And so we realized actually we needed a different metric, which we've now set, which is to be 24/7 carbon-free by 2030. And that means in each location, so in each grid where we operate, we're investing in technologies so that we can procure 100% carbon-free energy every hour of every day. Last year, we were about 66% of the way there. We have 7 regions that are over 90% carbon-free. The UK will come on as carbon-free next year. So lots to do, and we're obviously reliant on working with technology providers, with innovators, with governments, but a really important goal that we need to deliver on. Secondly, we want to be able to help companies reduce their cloud footprint, and I'll tell you a bit more about how we're doing that, but clearly using AI for carbon-aware computing is a crucial part of that. And then finally, we've also set a goal to be net zero across our entire value chain by 2030. And then the third pillar is how we can enable our partners to decarbonize. And that, as I say, that's companies, governments, NGOs, universities. And here's just a selection of use cases of how we're doing that. I've just been working in the UK banking sector with a UK bank where we're showing how AI can be used to monitor agriculture in the UK. We can model and monitor 1.5 million parcels of farmland every single day for changes in crop type, for changes in reforestation, in wildlife corridors, in hedgerows. And this is very useful for banks as they're lending to farmers to be able to understand, compliance to EU taxonomy, or where are the opportunities to provide climate finance, flood defense, flood protection to those farmers. Now I want to shift to the second part, which is Google Cloud. My CEO, Thomas Kurian, has said that we're entering a new era of sustainability-driven business transformation. And we really fundamentally believe that technology and AI will be a key enabler in facilitating the industry transitions that we need so desperately. And as you've heard from Laura, we know that technology will be at the heart of our energy transition in the UK. And we want, as a cloud provider, we very much want to be at the heart of facilitating that. Here are some examples of the kind of questions that we've been having over the last 12 months, very much prompted by the growing interest in the power of AI. How can we use AI to measure progress? How can we use it to monitor resilience, particularly climate risk? How can we use AI to identify opportunities for growth in the energy transition? Which buildings are going to need rooftop solar? Where can we locate renewable energy? How can we use AI to build transparency in supply chains? So a lot of consumer goods and retailers in Europe are asking questions about the EU deforestation regulations. They want to be able to know where their commodities are coming from and the impacts on forestry. What's the role that AI, particularly geospatial, can play in that challenge? How can we use AI to drive efficiency, particularly in energy? And how can we use AI to facilitate license to operate and regulatory compliance? So we've given that a lot of thought, and we think there are really 4 areas where we as a cloud provider can provide assistance to our customers. And these are the 4. The first is how do we harness AI to drive measurement? Many companies have traditionally been using maybe informal tools, spreadsheets for managing sustainability data, But now they need greater confidence in that data if they're going to have to disclose it to regulators and to investors. They need tools that allow them to connect that data to ERP systems for business decision making. And they're having to manage much larger volumes of data, often outside of the boundaries of their business, maybe in supply chains. There's new sources of data from sensors and IoT and satellite data. So there's a real measurement challenge, and often a big data challenge. The second is about optimization. So how do we use AI to improve the efficiency of the incumbent business, our operations, our supply chains? How do we get smarter at managing energy, water, waste, materials across our business? And we can see applications for AI there. Thirdly, there's a growth opportunity. As we see industries transition, how do we use AI to help companies understand where those opportunities lie? And then finally, and of course for a cloud provider, we need to help companies build sustainably on Google Cloud, particularly as they're driving bigger workloads. And I'll tell you a bit about the tools that we're introducing to help with that build. Now, we're not doing this on our own. We really recognize that we've got core Google Cloud products, but there's a wonderful spectrum of solution providers. Many of them are downstairs. And so we've created a designation that we call Google Cloud Ready Sustainability, which is a validation program where we find best-in-class climate tech solutions, and many of them are building on Google Cloud. In fact, 80% of those validated are building only on Google Cloud. And then we help those climate tech companies take their solutions to market. Watershed is one example here, who are helping companies with CSRD compliance and climate analytics, building exclusively on Google Cloud. We're empowering Google Cloud Salesforce to take that solution to market. And in February this year, we partnered with HSBC to bring finance to support this ecosystem with their first venture debt deal with one of our partners, Level 10. Because we realize, as well as cloud technology, our partners also need finance to scale. They're building on core Google Cloud products with data warehousing, analytics, all the usual things that you would expect from a cloud provider. But we also have a few things that are really special. We have our Google Earth Engine. How many of you have used Google Earth? So Google Earth Engine is now available for commercial use. And we have our Google Maps, and we've launched an environmental layer in September last year. We call it the environmental APIs. At the moment, we've got a solar API, an air quality API, and a pollen API. We're seeing amazingly cool things with the air quality API. For example, you'll be in your car and it will turn onto a street with a street that's got higher levels of air pollution, and the car will connect to the API and know to adjust the air conditioning in the car, for example. That's one application. And I'll give you an example of the solar API in a moment. Just to call out Earth Engine, this is 90 petabytes of data. That's a lot of data collected over 20 years. And we see many companies using the Earth Engine to model impacts of their supply chains, commodity production, to model impacts of nature on their businesses. Now, I just want to give you a few use cases across those 4 pillars, and then I promise I'll wrap up. The first one is about measurement. And here are some of the examples. We know that companies historically have measured for reporting, but increasingly they want to measure for business decision making. So we need to be able to integrate sustainability data or ESG data into the hands of, say, the procurement manager or the supply chain manager. And so that requires some important plumbing. We need to understand climate risks, both chronic, so long-term risks, but we also need to understand the next 30 days or the next 90 days when we're making decisions about infrastructure or investment. A huge opportunity around harnessing geospatial insights. And then, of course, many companies coming to us at the moment because of CSRD in Europe. How can they harness cloud and our partner technologies? One example is Palo Alto Networks in the US. I mentioned Watershed. They're using Watershed to track and monitor their carbon emissions, not just in their operations, but also their scope 3. The second is about optimization. And here we're seeing use cases in AI for fleet electrification and route optimization. We have a fantastic partner called Geotab who are putting telematics inside the vehicle to optimize routes. network energy efficiency for telcos, building and manufacturing energy efficiency. We have a fantastic partner called mCloud, again, using sensors in manufacturing to optimize for energy, supply chain, and of course, inventory management. And just on the point there on sourcing, we've seen really interesting things with generative AI. So this is a little illustration of where a procurement manager may want to ask questions of supply chain data. So imagine you're a procurement manager and you've got tens of thousands of suppliers, and you want to understand how those suppliers are performing against some carbon reduction targets that have been set. Historically, you might have had to use some spreadsheets. You might have had to go and look through supplier returns that have been sent to you. Now we can have conversations with that data in natural language. And that's particularly important for non-sustainability specialists who haven't necessarily been trained, but have been given a target to deliver for their part of the business. Another great example on sourcing is work that we've been doing with Unilever over the last 3 or 4 years, where we're helping them to monitor forestry around their palm oil production using geospatial analytics. So we can provide live alerts if there's a potential deforestation risk. The third pillar is about growth, and the kind of use cases are: how do we target customers for renewables? How do we power mobility platforms, re-commerce platforms? So, my daughters, I have 3 daughters, they're all on Depop trading brands, clothing brands. And those types of re-commerce platforms are very much growing at the moment and very reliant on cloud. Sustainable finance, so knowing where to allocate that capital, product transparency, labeling, and renewable energy platforms. Many of the things that Laura talked about, where we're seeing flexibility, are going to be reliant on cloud technologies. Just a quick snapshot of the solar API. So as an installer, you can put in the address of the property, and it will give you the suitability of rooftop solar. It will also spec out how many panels, what kind of tilts are needed, so that the installer knows very quickly what kind of job is required for that property. But we can do that for every rooftop in the UK, right? Anywhere where we're applying the solar API. And also with some of the new satellites that are going up now, we can also monitor heat loss. So not just the opportunity for rooftop solar, but where should we be investing in energy efficiency improvements? And then finally, build. We have many customers who have a large part of their scope 3 is the cloud footprint. And so we've created something called the Carbon Sense Suite, which is a bunch of tools that allow companies to monitor and track their carbon footprint. We can provide data on location or market-based. We can provide recommendations. So are there workloads you're running that you don't need to run? Can we move workloads to lower carbon regions? So if it's sunny in Iowa and you're running your data in the UK, why don't we move it to Iowa so we can reduce the carbon intensity of that workload, for example? And we can also let companies specify a limit to the carbon intensity of their compute. I mentioned the Carbon Sense Suite. Here's a visual of the console where your IT teams can access the data that they need for your Scope 3 reporting. And one case study here of Etsy, who've been working with us to create a solution they call Cloud Joules, which is a tool that they use for monitoring their cloud footprint. If you think of a business like Etsy, a large part of its footprint is in cloud technology. So that's a very fast run through what Google is doing, how we're positioning our work in Google Cloud as a partner, and hopefully some valuable insights into the application of cloud and AI to sustainability. Thank you very much, Bit, for having me.
Justin, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I don't envy my colleague who's going to try and wrap up the key points from today. It's amazing to hear what's going on in this space. So we're about to move to our first panel session, which will be about 40 minutes, and then we will have a quick break back for the second half after that. But just as we prepare the stage for the panelists, we'll just play a little bit of music as we bring everyone up, and I'll introduce them shortly. So just stand by.
very varied. Yeah, I think the same.
Okay, can I?
Service is very essential for us. The education and the skilling. Can't do without.
Can I welcome to the stage our panelists? Let's starting with James Wild, who is the Chief Sustainability Officer at Phoenix Group. Jenny Ray, Chief Information Officer at Imperial University. Lara Martini, who's a non-executive director at Magna Housing, amongst others. And finally, Deepak Jopaputra, who is the Chief Sustainability Officer at Vitality.
Thank you. If you want to take pictures either there or there, whichever works.
Wonderful.
Thanks, Kate.
Thank you.
Laura, would you like to come in the middle,
Sorry.
There we go. There,
Where would you like me? At the end?
If you're, there we go.
Okay.
Perfect. I'll come over this.
Centre stage.
Whoops, I think I went to the wrong place. My fault.
No worry.
Okay, so as I mentioned at the very beginning, this is a first of our panels, and this is to talk about some of the challenges and indeed opportunities that our esteemed panelists here have to find in their organisation to drive the sustainability agenda. And I think what you'll see is this is not about just looking at their own footprint as an organisation. That's basic hygiene these days. What about it means in terms of transforming their organisations and driving forward this agenda? So we've got a few questions which I'll kick off with, and we'll go for about half an hour. And as I said before, we'll then turn to the audience. And I'm not going to go in any particular order here. I'm going to actually start, if I may, with Deepak.
Sure.
Now, Deepak, your brand Vitality is everywhere these days. You can't put the TV on without seeing your brand. But can you just tell us a little bit about what the Vitality business model is, and how does sustainability fit into that?
Sure, absolutely. And it's great to hear that. Can you hear me? Yeah. It's great to hear that Vitality is kind of being featured and not going unnoticed. It's great. So Vitality is a next generation life and health insurer. So big emphasis on the next generation. We try and put the excitement into insurance because we all know insurance isn't the most exciting service. And our core purpose is to make people healthier and enhance and protect their lives. That's been kind of part of our DNA since we started the company. And we do this in 3 really simple steps. We help people understand their health really simply by digital means. Through an algorithm, we ask you a few questions about yourself, and it plays back a Vitality age, which is in effect your health age. If it's higher, you've got to start doing something. So if it's there or thereabouts, you're in good shape. Second step of that third stage process is very much, we give you the tools to look after your health. We all want to be healthy, but it's actually quite hard. So access to discounted access to gyms, very heavily discounted Apple Watches and other wearable devices, and a whole host of other kind of health screens, etc., that really make it easy for you to access ways in which you can look after your health. And the third and most exciting are the rewards and the incentives. So we bribe you for looking after your health, and it is absolutely remarkable. I have to really get very excited about this. What people will do for a free cup of coffee. When we introduced coffee benefits, we noticed that people were doing their 10,000 steps a day just to get their free coffee. And there are other rewards like cinema tickets, free cinema tickets, 75% off spas, etc. So it's a very virtuous model that kind of works. It really motivates people to look after their health. And we call this our shared value model, whereby we create value, we make you healthier, make you lead a healthier life. In doing so, you access lower premiums and all these rewards. We benefit because we pay out a lesser amount in claims. We have fewer claims, but we give that back to you in the way of rewards. And society benefits through a healthier nation. And importantly, when we're talking about sustainability, healthcare is a very carbon-intensive industry. It's actually more intensive than aviation. Now, you'd think, taking a flight somewhere, that would kind of psychologically and very visibly think, gosh, that's quite carbon intensive. But actually healthcare is far more intensive. And our model of driving prevention can really help make not only the nation healthier, but actually cut emissions as well. So it just gives you a brief intro into Vitality. There's a lot more I want to say, but we'll kind of...
Well, just on that theme, Deepak, we heard Laura talk about the role of data digitalization. How is your business model exploiting the opportunities that affords?
Yeah, it's huge. You know, if I look at, I've been with Vitality almost 20 years now. How we started the model, you know, in the early stages, very basic. We were giving away free gym memberships, and there wasn't a lot of data. And what we've learned over the last 5-7 years, the power of data is incredible. To such an extent, we actually understand within our member base, in a very respectful way, that what works for one person, you know, different things will work for different people. You know, someone isn't very physically active. If you say to them, do 10,000 steps to get your free coffee, you've lost them. It's too big a step. So we've trialed some pilots whereby we say to people who are not doing any steps, get to 2,000 steps a day, which is very achievable. We get them into that habit formation, and then after 3 or 4 weeks, we kind of push them to 4,000, and you kind of test the boundaries. And actually what you learn through, you know, this is one example, the power of data in understanding hyper-personalization. So our app measures your health status through a wearable device. So it's kind of watching me, and every so often it's telling me, Deepak, you haven't done your steps, go out and do your steps, or you know, your heart rate is high, or you may have had a fall. So there's a lot of exciting developments happening in the field of technology and digitization that can really help make the world a better place, make people healthier, reduce the burden on the NHS, and also cut carbon emissions at the same time.
Great, Deepak, thank you very much. We'll come back to some of that, I'm sure. But if I can turn Jenny to your organisation, you know, what are the drivers and the motivations for an organisation like Imperial to really grip the sustainability agenda?
So we are a top 6 university worldwide, top 3 in the UK. We are a research-heavy university as well, and so a lot of the research that we conduct is in this space. We have about 23,000 students and 8,000 staff, and that's across 9 different campuses in London, including core campuses and hospitals as well. Just to give you a little feel for Imperial, so we have 4 faculties. We are what we call a STEM B university, so our faculties centre around sciences, technology, engineering. So we have a faculty of medicine, faculty of natural sciences, a business school, and a faculty of medicine. Yeah, I think I've said all 4, checking them all off there. In terms of our motivations, last month we launched our new Imperial strategy for the organisation, a bold, ambitious strategy for the college. And really this has got a real big ambition with the tagline of Science for Humanity. And within that, there's a sustainability pillar. So we talk about sustainable Imperial. So it is completely embedded into what we're doing in our strategic direction as an organisation. Sustainability is at the heart of what we do. We have the Grantham Institute, that is a world-leading authority on climate and environmental science. And we're working to our target of by 2040 of completely having net zero for all of our scope 1 and 2 emissions. So coming back to your question, what does this mean to us? You know, this is completely embedded in the DNA of Imperial, and our goal is to be the global benchmark for university sustainability.
And are you seeing your students and other stakeholders asking more questions about this? Do they care about it?
100%, yes. This is part of some of the decisions around why you choose a university as well. Right? It's how we act as an organisation. So be this from what may seem small things in terms of the choices we have on the catering at our campuses. Right? We're reducing the use of beef across campuses. We're replacing it with venison, but you know, that's sustainable and wildly caught, etc. And also things like how we are, you know, introducing sort of electric shuttle buses between campuses. You know, they're all things that signal, particularly to our student population of both undergraduates and postgraduates, that we take this seriously. And in some cases, yes, of course, you know, you need to get the marks and the grades to come, but you know, in a lot of cases, it's something that can help differentiate Imperial.
And I guess many of the audience are, you know, thinking about what does this mean in terms of their own organisations and some of the challenges to shift the dial on this. Give us an example of some of the barriers that you've faced and what have you done to overcome them?
So, look, one big thing that I always say as a CIO quite a lot of the time is this is more than just technology. So this isn't something that's like just going to be driven from a digital perspective. There really is, a real key theme of sustainability that from an IT team perspective, we've embedded it into something that's called the digital plan, and our digital plan underpins that new strategy that I just talked about. But tech alone can't make this happen. This is about how we're going to work differently across Imperial, how we're going to do things differently. So that's one big challenge, and that's a cultural one. A second challenge is around data. So it's been said several times on this stage already today. Data is a challenge, also an opportunity for an IT team, right? Because we can make a difference now. If we can get that data into the hands of employees across Imperial, they can then make the insight and the decisions around it. We can get it to our teams in the States who are looking at our energy usage when it's term time versus when it's college closure, and they can make adjustments accordingly. And then one final thing as well, in terms of challenges, is it needs investment, right? You need to have a board, and you need to have a committed board that are willing to spend the money on this. So if you look at our campus over in White City, that's growing hugely at the moment, and the whole south side is currently in construction, and our board are committed for that that's all been designed with no fossil gas and low carbon, and our board have got behind that sort of huge, there's a £2 billion investment over in White City from Imperial, and a lot of that is also driven by making decisions that, yes, they're not just a monetary one, it's about cementing the strategy and the sustainable approach.
Great, thank you, Jenny. I'm going to turn to James, if I may, next. James, you're at Phoenix Group. Why don't you say a little bit about Phoenix Group and your role there and some of the challenges that you face, and particularly because you're coming from the financial services sector, what is the role of that sector in mobilising the net zero transition?
Yeah. Thanks, Trevor. It's a pleasure to be here today. I'm the Chief Sustainability Officer at Phoenix Group. It's one of those big companies not everyone's heard of. So we're a FTSE 100 company, the UK's largest long-term savings and retirement business. So we've got 12 million customers, about 0.3 trillion of assets under management. 1 in 5 people have their pension with us. So there's 2 big themes in our sustainability strategy, one that's social and one that's climate related and investing in a sustainable future. So on the social side, it's actually all about financial wellness and engaging people in their financial futures. There's a huge pension savings gap in the UK. Everyone's living longer. 1 in 3 people who are born today are going to live to 100, and yet people aren't very engaged in their financials, particularly their pension. So only 14% of defined contribution savers are on track for a comfortable retirement. So a really big theme for us is engaging people in that issue, making them aware of the problem, and then giving them the support and the tools they need to make the right financial decisions. So a big focus on digital innovation in that context. But with 0.3 trillion of assets, we've got a huge opportunity to invest in the future we all want. It's also in our customers' best interest, because by doing that, we can maximise returns for our customers, because there's very significant risks and opportunities associated with the low carbon transition. So we've said we're going to align our investment portfolio with net zero. We've got 2025 and 2030 targets, and we're taking 3 big moves. The first is tilting our portfolios. So we're actively selecting to support the winners over the losers, preferentially across our portfolios. We're doing it systematically across our 160 billion liquid equity and credit portfolio, starting shortly with a 40 billion investment portfolio in US and UK equity. The second big theme for us is stewardship, so it's holding companies to account. As a large asset owner, we can have a big influence on the companies we invest in, and it's the old 80-20 rule. About 20% of the assets are responsible for 90% of our emissions, and our emissions are huge through our finance portfolio. It's 25 million tonnes of CO2, equivalent to 5% of the UK's emissions. So we have a direct engagement programme with those 25 companies, both as Phoenix and in collaboration with other asset owners, because then we can have a very large share of those companies. The third big theme for us is direct investment. So our sector as a whole can provide a half of the finance required over the next 15 years in the UK, about 1.2 trillion is half the finance. We're the largest in the sector. So we've said we want to invest 40 billion in low carbon and productive assets in the UK. And so we're actively out there investing in long-term infrastructure, but all the way through to venture capital. So we've set up a couple of £100 million venture capital funds. So really big focus on investing at scale. But another important thing, given that people aren't very engaged in their pensions, is actually using this great story about how we're investing in a sustainable future to engage our customers on the fact that their money is investing and it's making a difference. So that's a really big theme for us, engaging consumers as well.
And James, you don't get out of bed for less than 100 million. You know, you've got this wall of capital to invest. What are the challenges you're seeing to actually finding investable projects?
Yeah, it is a challenge because we're a large-scale investor, and our projects are typically 50 million, 100 million plus on the illiquid side. And so we did a piece of work working with our whole industry, actually. There's real barriers on the financial regulation side that restrict us putting money in, but there's real economy problems as well in terms of things like having investable projects with stable long-term policy through to the transaction costs associated with projects. It really helps us if things are aggregated up on a project basis so that we can invest at real scale in large-scale program portfolios. So we've got a couple of big themes that we've been working on. One is place-based investing. So can we work with cities to fund a whole pool of different types of assets at once? Through to working with the government to say, can we set up a national net zero transition plan? All companies are setting up transition plans. It would be brilliant if the UK government set one up with very much the investor in mind. You know, we've got half the money needed to invest. We're struggling to find investable projects. Let's work out clear route maps by sector, what investment needs to come through, and how do you make that investment attractive to flow? So a couple of themes there, Trevor.
Yeah, and I like what you said around how individuals need to pay much more closer attention to their own pensions, if they're lucky to have them, their own savings, and the power that they have with what they do with their money in terms of investment. And do you think that's something that the average person really understands, or indeed actually some of your peers within the financial services sector are doing enough to ask people to think a little bit more around that?
Yeah, it's a really interesting theme because only 20% of people, 20% of people don't even know their pension's invested. A lot of people aren't very engaged in their pension. And what we find is that we do a lot of customer research. People always want returns first. It's given. But they expect us to invest responsibly on their behalf. Most people think that investing responsibly will deliver good returns. And they also expect us to invest responsibly across all portfolios, not just the ones labelled green. So that's been a really big focus for us, actually. And we've, particularly for our workplace offer, so pension schemes for large corporates, we introduced a sustainable default because most people don't make a choice. More than 95% of the people stay in the default. So we made our default sustainable. And we've got 1.5 million people, about 24 billion of assets in that sustainable default. That goes around really well with corporates, because corporates have set net zero goals. It's important their pension aligns with that, but it's a way of engaging the individual as well.
Great, thank you, James. Lara, if I can turn to you now. Now, Lara, you're have got a bit of a journey with our housing association, Magna Housing. Just tell us a little bit about some of the challenges you face there in that sort of built environment sector.
Sure, thank you, Trevor. So I joined the board of Magna about a year and a half ago, bringing the digital transformation and the sustainability skills to the board. And I think this is meaningful because it tells you how there is a will to have that attention at all levels of the organization. We've just released our first sustainability reports. We're building the team. So, well, first of all, why do this? There is no doubt. Built environment represents about 38% of emission, 35% of energy use as well. So this is something we want to do. Magna is a bit of a special organization. We are a social housing operator, which means we have a duty to be profitable, to foster and bring community value, and we are regulated. So navigating this is not easy because we are regulated for safety, we're also regulated for money for value. So you constantly have to justify that anything you do, even when you're doing it for the right reasons, you're doing it for long-term sustainability, also complies with these other two. One of the other challenges is in the built environment, about 80% of emissions, not surprisingly, come from scope 3. So we've been working at two levels. We've been working on decarbonizing our assets and our products, and we've been working on decarbonizing our operations. For the assets, what we've done is look at industry standards, things like REBA standards for 2030, and look at the embedded carbon and total lifetime value of our homes. We have about 9,000 homes. We're building another 30,000 between now and 2030. So how can we do that? And one of the big bets we've done is with modern methods of construction, which for those who are not familiar is essentially pre-built home. The advantage that it brings is that because you apply the methods of manufacturing to housing, you can do skilling, you can bring efficiency, you move where you're building the emissions so that they can be captured at the source and dealt with. We've also been looking at reusing materials. So 60% of our steel is recycled today, and we're bringing the production of the smaller parts closer to home. So we're doing that locally, which limits transport. All of that is on the product side. On the operation side, a lot has been around energy and renewable, but we're also working with our supply chain. And what we have found is that when you embed sustainability in your purchasing criteria, you don't always find what you want, because some of these supply chains are very small, very fragile, and in MMC that's actually one of the challenges, because although you have a number of suppliers, their suppliers are even less. So you try and diversify, but you're still not diversified 2-3 steps down the chain. So what we do is we do a little bit what you guys do in finance. We go for best in class. We go with collaborations with our suppliers, sharing the information, sharing the technology, and then we'll do everything we can do to interrogate the data, such as we found that if we only have journeys with full trucks instead of half loads, that already has an impact. And then the third thing is really work with the local authorities, with the community, with the residents. Sometimes our communities don't see the value, so there is a lot of work to do in terms of client education. And then finally, we work with universities for green skills, because one of the biggest challenges at the moment is simply skills. 60% of our budget today goes in retrofitting versus new build. Part of that is materials, but a lot is skilling. So we work with local universities in order to have the trainee programs and to build the skills we think we'll need over the next 20 years.
Wonderful, Lara. And Lara, you've sort of highlighted the G in ESG, the governance of this agenda, and you're sitting on a board there. In your view, do you think boards generally are equipped to really steer companies on this net zero and sustainability journey?
I think there is a lot of will. I think the challenge lies in the data. So what happens often at board level is you either get drowned in 200 pages of very detailed data, or you don't get enough. And finding the right balance is really difficult for executive teams. The other problem is system thinking. So we try to think of things in systems, but a lot of the data comes into silos, whether it's from procurement, from operation, from other sides. So I think there's a lot to do there in terms of fostering the right conversations. In my experience, there is a will to do it, but you really need to support the conversation and be able to ground it, and then define what success looks like and make bets. So we know water is important, but at the moment we're working on nutrient neutrality. We're not yet working on water capture. Is it important? Yes, but again, we can't give our team 10 different things to do. We have to make bets and know what we want to be known for now, and then tackle a new battle once that is done.
Great. And I'll ask you one more question, Lara, and then I'm going to turn to the audience. So have your questions ready. Lara, I'm interested, you know, on your CV, you've had roles in the Middle East, North America, Latin America, in Europe, and you've seen a lot of the ways that organizations are tackling this agenda. You know, are there some, you know, really inspiring stories, examples that you've seen elsewhere that we could thrive in the UK?
So let me start with the good. I think here in the UK we have a fantastic opportunity for Scope 2 with renewables. I think co-regulation and the tradition of co-regulation really opens an opportunity for collaboration across industry. So those two things are absolutely essential. I think some of the things that we need to stay curious about are, one, from our end, MMC and disability. There's still a bit of a stigma here in the UK, and it's important to be open because it does open to that approach to being more systematic. The other thing is looking at other countries, one where they brought down cost barriers. So cost is clearly a challenge. We've heard it from those who have been here this morning through the day. If we look at, for example, sustainability of cell phone towers in a storm, or solving for water depuration. Other countries have solved that. If we look at Africa, if we look at Middle East, Latin America. So how can we look at low-cost solution and import them from markets that have solved for that, or problems that we haven't encountered yet? The other thing I think is we tend to still think of land very much as this is for housing, this is for recreation, this is for agriculture, this is for nature. How we can embed those more, and so use the built environment more for food production or for nature and so on. And I think there's a lot we can learn there.
Great. Okay, let's turn to the audience. Last 15 minutes before the break. If you can put your hand up, there's a roving mic, and name, organisation, and who your question is directed at. And I can feel a rush coming on, a real rush of people. We've asked, there we are, gentleman over there.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Ben Ross from Verco. I guess a question for the whole panel. Be really interested in your biggest Scope 3 challenge around data and how you're addressing that at the moment.
Great. Who wants to kick off with that one? Deepak.
Sure. Yeah. Clearly, as Meg just mentioned, Scope 3 is the biggest part of kind of a lot of organisations' emissions. Ours is kind of above 90%. So that kind of role of influence becomes really very important. And in the healthcare industry, the provision of healthcare. So we do a lot of work with hospital providers, and when we use, for example, just a slight diversion to the answer there, the government, the DEFRA emission factors, year on year, those emission factors are kind of waving around all the time. And I take to the board a set of numbers, and as an actuary, I need to understand the numbers, and I say to the board, the number's this, and we were working with the sustainability consultancy that actually expressed, don't worry too much about the numbers, just start with a baseline and work downwards. I just got stuck at the point when they said to me, don't worry about the numbers, and I couldn't kind of sleep for a couple of weeks. But I understand where they're coming from. You've got to start somewhere and work your way down. So it's acknowledging and kind of qualifying the numbers from that perspective. But we've worked with our trade body, the ABI, very closely, and we've collated a group of insurers and hospital groups where we've kind of sat down, got a common issue around the data, and we're working towards a kind of consistent framework whereby we can kind of create a systematic approach to collating that data. But in the meantime, really honing in and kind of focusing on real-world actions, so understanding within the healthcare process, where are the big emission sources? So anesthetics, for example, is a very, very big kind of dirty gas whereby you get a lot of emissions. The NHS is working on this, the whole kind of industry, the healthcare industry. I know way more about anesthetic gases than I care to. Desflurane is the main dirty one. It's being phased out. So we're doing both things at the same time, and I'm sure you'll hear a lot of people say within sustainability, it's a journey. We're all learning, and you just got to do both at the same time. Keep maturing the measurement, the action, but at the same time take real-world action.
Thanks, Deepak. I might just, Jenny, you look like you're going to jump in.
Yeah, I was just going to say, look, I sit here as probably the biggest driver of Scope 3 emissions for Imperial, right? So we know this as a team. We probably drive about 30% of the emissions for Scope 3 in the IT team. Not surprising, like you look at all the SaaS services we buy, like everything from Office 365 from Microsoft through to the data centers we run, etc. Coming back to your question, Ben, about what are we doing about it? Well, actually, one of the big things we've done is implemented a procurement policy. So actually, we're properly now having the conversations with these suppliers, because sometimes there's a lot of talk about, oh yeah, we're sustainable, and you get the nice glossy marketing brochures. But actually what we're doing now is sitting down with those technology partners and really understanding what is it you're delivering and how can we truly partner to reduce those Scope 3 emissions.
Great. Look, I'll take some other questions. We won't go through all of the panel. So there's a gentleman first and then a lady second.
Hello, Bob Salmon from QualisFlow. We've heard quite a lot of talk of data and AI as tools we can use in sustainability. I'd be very interested from the panel if they've had experiences where someone has said, we've got this big pile of data, why don't we just chuck AI at it? And then you start doing that and you go, oh, wait a minute, the quality of this data is really very bad. It's missing or inconsistent or otherwise bad. And that's derailed or at least paused your AI project or other data processing project. And what have you done about it?
Okay, thank you. We'll take the ladies' question as well, if we may, and then we'll answer those.
Hello, Annabelle Nelson, independent advisor on sustainable finance. My question is related to the gentleman's here's, which is around sustainability. We've heard a lot about carbon emissions and AI, but sustainability, carbon's the driver of climate change, but the impact is being felt through water, and that's going to be a very big problem we face in terms of the availability of water, because AI and the tech to make the AI is highly water intensive. The risk is pervasive. How is the panel thinking about that risk?
Yeah, no, great question. What's the impact of AI, both as a solution, but it's also a problem? So maybe I can turn down to the end here, James.
Shall I go first? Yeah, happy to. When you asked the question about Scope 3 and the biggest challenge, we've started to move on to nature and looking at our exposure to nature through the Task Force for Nature-related Financial Disclosures. It's much more challenging than carbon. We've measured 98% of our footprint in carbon and of our assets. Nature, we're at the start of that journey. There's 16 different metrics. You have to track down the supply chain, and it's location specific. So it's a much more challenging exercise. We've been going out. We did pilot the methodology, working with a pool of asset managers and data providers. We found it was really hard to get good data to use the methodology. So now we're talking to a number of different providers to understand what solutions they've got. A number are talking about AI, so that they go out and use AI to gather information from public available sources and bring it together. Also satellite data to start gathering information about where the assets are and how they impact their local environment. But we're at the start of the journey, and to be honest, we're going to have to, what we're looking to do at the moment is focus down, as you were saying, the big bets. We're going to try and work out which supply chains are the most important, which issues are the most important, and then really focus on those. Because we also want to act as well as just measure and analyse the risks. So we're also looking at how we might invest in nature-based solutions at real scale.
Great, thanks. Laura, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, so absolutely agree. I mean, the main challenge from supplier is we tend to work with a cascading of supplier, and that really fragments the information. So what we can try and do is work with them, use some secondary data where we have standards for the industry for materials, try and get our own data. Satellite is one, for example, when we assess the land, the best use of land. Even if we're a small organization, we have literally diggers today guided by satellites for precision. So all those things can help us to make decisions. I think around AI, I mean, obviously the consume of electricity, you were saying that has to be renewable. The biggest challenge stems around the type of data you're using, because when we look at social sustainability, there are some very sensitive data. So as an organization, we're held accountable when we have vulnerable residents. Sometimes we don't know it. Sometimes that is data that you cannot use or you can use in very restricted ways. So we have to be very smart in the way you use AI in the right way. The other challenge is what to communicate on and not. And like maybe many organizations here in the audience, I would say at the moment we're almost under-communicating versus what we do, because there is a risk with uncertain data that it might not be seen as perfect. You don't want to be seen as doing greenwashing. So what we do is we under-communicate, we wait, we iterate, we do it for a number of times, and then maybe in 3 years down the line, we're going to communicate externally. And for a while, we incubate in-house until we have that level of confidence that whatever we communicate externally is true and can be sustained.
Great. Any more questions? Girish here.
Thank you. I'm Girish Iyer from Shell Energy. My question specifically for James. You manage part of my pension fund, so I'm personally interested as well. You mentioned about the pivot in allocating or creating like a green fund, right, as a part of your pension portfolio, which you're offering to certain corporate customers. Have you seen certain sectors or areas which are, I guess, delivering respectable enough returns to encourage that kind of pool to grow further? Because traditionally, people have always questioned, right, what kind of returns would anything which is anchoring around green and sustainability give in the short term. Long term, yes, people see hope. So just curious to see, given sustained capital investment from pension funds like yours, I think is a critical enabler to drive this whole innovation funnel. So just curious to hear that.
So I couldn't hear the whole question. Was it, could you repeat the essence of it again?
Sure. So one of your suggestions or your initiatives you mentioned is a green fund as a part of your pension portfolio for corporate customers. So within that, are you seeing areas which are delivering respectable enough returns for that to be grow further and encourage more corporates to say, hey, this is a good balance of doing the right thing as well as returns?
Yeah. So we've got quite a range of different things. So our default deliberately keeps an exposure to the whole economy. But what we do is we try and tilt in each sector. We keep a level of exposure, but we analyse the companies in a lot of detail, and we make sure that we're preferentially funding the winners in that sector rather than the losers. We have different types of funds as well, though. So everything from venture capital funds, where we're investing in early stage companies, to climate solution funds, where they'll only invest in the winners rather than other companies. We do a lot of analysis looking at the winners and losers in each sector, and we find some sectors overall are going to be doing well as opposed to others, but it's amazing how many winners and losers there are within the sectors. That's one of the biggest drivers, actually. So look at something like the utility sector, we see a big variation in the level of returns that companies are going to get going forward, and so that's where data really comes in for us, so that we use a whole pool of different ESG rating providers and look at source data ourselves to come up with our own benchmarks and analyse the companies.
Just because they've got louder music than we have doesn't mean they're having as much fun, yeah? So let's, there's a couple more hands. Gentleman here and then over there. And then I reckon that will probably wrap us up.
To take the tone down a bit, Professor Jem Bendell says that actually the global metrics show that we are actually in a state of collapse already. Now, how does that affect what our panel think and plan for?
What a great question. I'll also take the question over there, if I may, very quickly, to give the panel a little bit of time to think about that, because that is the nub of the issue. David.
And I guess indirectly kind of related to that with the mention of the professor, my question primarily for Jenny, but for the whole panel, what's the role of research in our research institutions in solving all of these problems we're talking about? And are you seeing the kind of collaboration within the sector in higher education that's required, but then also the interaction and the willingness from the private sector to actually capitalize on the arguably, arguably less biased research that universities might be doing?
Great, thank you, questioners. What's the role of your businesses where we're already in a state of collapse on a number of metrics? We're exceeding the environmental limits of one planet quite readily across a number of metrics. So what do you as businesses and organizations need to do in the face of that? So who wants to take that one first? Lara, on the end.
Sure. Well, I think the first thing is to look at the trends and the data and look ahead. So we tend to always work for the last problem that happened, which in the case of housing is damp and mold. We're already working for what happens for the next heat wave. As we look at the land, we're also already thinking what that land will look like. So in terms of where we can build and not, looking at future floods and so on. But we're also looking at what do we want it to look like in terms of sharing, very dramatic music in the background as well, in terms of sharing that space. So I think we have a role to play. The other thing for us is really building that future pool of skills. So at the moment, built environment hasn't attracted a very diverse pool of talent or younger talent. How do we show how what we do aligns to that vision and bring people into the sector, because we will need those new skills and we will need informed communities. So what we do is very much in terms of thinking ahead and developing the human side of the communities and the skilling.
Okay. Jenny, do you want to tackle the one around the research?
Yeah, sure. So I'll just quickly add in terms of Imperial's role. It is education, right? This is what we're here for. And actually, our business school are here today talking about some of our executive education programs. So please do go and have a look at what we can offer. In terms of research, look, we get about £500 million worth of grants a year, right, in research. Imperial is the UK institute that drives the most amount of world-changing, impacting research across the globe. One of the big things we're doing that I'll just talk about is our zero index and our social responsibility investment policy now means that when we're engaging with companies like fossil fuel-driven companies, etc., we're now only doing that on a research perspective where it strongly aligns to decarbonisation plans and that partner can clearly demonstrate a credible strategic commitment to net zero by 2050. So coming back to your question, we are focusing the research to where we can have the biggest impact and making sure that those partners that we're working for are committed to this as well. And then we're nurturing graduates, right, who can be the advocates for climate science moving forward.
Okay. Anything last from James or Deepak on the very thorny question?
Yeah, it's a great question. I do find that the fact that it's such an emergency to act means our board really engages in these issues. We just published our net zero transition plan last year. It meant that we could be ambitious because there was a real belief there was a financial risk and opportunity associated with the transition. But we have an increasing focus on climate risk as well and physical risk. And the modelling of physical risk is nowhere near as sophisticated as it is for transition risk. So that's a really big focus for us going forward, really trying to understand what those risks are and how we might support adaptation investment as well.
Great. Look, I'm going to draw us to a close there ahead of our break now. Could you thank the panellists in their usual way? Thank you very much. So the plan now is somebody's going to go down and... Oh, have I lost my... there we go. Somebody's going to go down and have a little word with them downstairs. But we've now got a 20-minute break. It's really just to stretch your legs, use the facilities, and we are back here at 4 o'clock for a keynote from Monica, who we'll introduce formally in a bit, the second panel, and then we'll be finishing around 5 o'clock with drinks reception outside. So thanks, everyone. Stretch your legs, back here on the dot at 4 o'clock. Thank you. Right, so let's get going. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce our next keynote speaker, Monica Collins, who is a real energy advocate. And if you want to know anything that's going on in the energy sector, you just have to follow her on LinkedIn because you're prolific, Monica, on LinkedIn. Monica used to be the CEO of an energy supply company, and now she is currently chair of Swarm Energy. So Monica, over to you.
Thank you so much. Nice to see everyone. Hope you're having a successful day. I think through my presentation, actually what I'm going to do is try and connect everything that you've already heard today. And I wish that I could say that I designed it that way, but actually I hadn't seen any of the other speakers' stuff. So it's kind of happened by chance, but I think actually it just goes to show that there's so much commonality of the challenges and opportunities that face us, irrespective of the sectors that we work in. So I am going to talk about the home energy revolution, but I'm going to try and put it in the context of what we're trying to do in the transition to net zero. So we have precisely 308 months to 2050. 307 tomorrow. So the scale of what we are trying to deliver is enormous. It is an absolutely monster of a task, and we haven't really seen anything like this since the Industrial Revolution. And I think Trevor mentioned the investment that is going to be necessary for us in order to deliver this. So those are some of the numbers that we're talking about here to try and put some context to that. And when I'm looking at these numbers, 70% of that, according to the latest reports, will come from the private sector. So there is plenty of opportunity for organisations to take a piece of the pie in terms of what this looks like. So when we try and think about that in the context of home and the home energy system, 17%, the numbers vary a little bit depending on latest reports, but around about 17% of the UK's carbon emissions come from homes. And that number needs to come down quite considerably. I'll come on to talk about that. And we've got to see that transition through energy reduction, so consumers are consuming less energy, but we've also got to see it come through from efficiency and how we help homes to become more energy efficient. This is where we need to be in terms of the numbers by 2050. I'm not going to call out all of these, but I think if we look at EPC, for example, 100% of our homes need to be between grades A to C. And we have some of the leakiest housing stock in Europe. So it's quite a significant challenge for us to be able to deliver on this when 65% of our homes are between D or below. It's a really big challenge. A lot of what we're expecting consumers to do is going to take behaviour change, but we know that behaviour change historically has been quite challenging. There's also other barriers, of course. There's regulatory challenges, policy challenges. If we're adopting low carbon technology, 1 in 4 homes require planning consent for heat pump installations, but yet we have to get to 21 million heat pumps installed in UK homes. And that's where we are today, 400,000. So in 307 months, we've got a really big job to do in terms of mass adoption of the low carbon technologies that we need to deliver for consumers. So talking about that context, I think Laura mentioned a little bit around the affordability crisis, and having led retailers, I can tell you through the energy crisis, it was incredibly challenging. Ofgem's latest statistics suggest that customers that are defaulting on direct debits is 4-fold what it was pre-energy crisis. Customers that don't have payment plans in place, up by 50% for those customers who are falling into debt. Latest stats, I think, showed around 6 or 7 million homes are in fuel poverty based on those definitions, but yet we still have to deliver a just energy transition, leaving nobody behind. Citizens Advice recently reported that 3 out of 5 customers don't know where to go to get energy advice. So actually it's quite confusing when they're looking at energy efficiency solutions. Where do they go? How do they navigate that information? There is a wave of skepticism around some of the low carbon technologies that the media has played out. And that also has driven a lack of trust. And that media narrative doesn't support us when we've got such an enormous job to do, and also to try and drive the change in consumer behaviour that we need to see in order to deliver the energy transition. So I think when we approach this task, we're going to need to think very creatively about it. And some of the examples that I look at for inspiration and lean on point me to the fact that actually we can't do it alone. We need to collaborate. We need to do it together. We need to find ways to use the technology to drive down the costs so that we can make solutions that are affordable and leave nobody behind. And we need to find a way that we can educate consumers and help them on the journey to make things very simple. And technology, I genuinely believe, can do a lot of the heavy lifting for consumers. So if we can find ways to make it simple and easy for them, preempting some of the challenges and barriers that they have, then that's perhaps the right way for us to go about tackling this solution. The hotel sector would never have invented Airbnb. The automotive sector would never have invented Uber. And so these kind of innovative solutions came out of inventors that turn the problem on its head and use technology to deliver alternative solutions. We heard from Justin earlier talking about AI, and we've certainly seen in the retail space with Octopus, where they've started implementing this from a customer service perspective. They have delivered efficiency in terms of reducing headcount and delivering operational efficiencies. But what they've also seen is that where AI has responded directly to consumers, improved CSAT scores, customer satisfaction scores, greater than those interactions directly with colleagues. Which is really interesting because this is becoming part of how we as consumers are engaging with companies. But we haven't quite got to the Uber scale alternative to whatever it's going to be for the energy system. I mean, Laura talked a lot about how we need to reinvent and reimagine the energy system, some of the challenges and the kind of the breadth and spectrum. And I've worked in this sector for 6 years, and prior to that I've worked in automotive, retail, home improvement, property. So I've touched a lot of the spectrum that touches net zero as a topic. And I can tell you that it's complicated. To try and put this simply for customers, what are they ultimately looking for? Well, they want a warm home that's comfortable and that they can afford to heat. And they don't really want to get into the intricacies of interoperability and all the stuff that people who talk about those things in the energy system. So I work across a portfolio of companies, and today I'm talking to you about Swarm. So I chair the board at Swarm. We've got Dan here at the front, who's the CEO. Hi, Dan. I am incredibly passionate about what this business is doing because we think that we can be at the heart of sort of driving the flexibility solutions for energy. So what is Swarm? Well, it is an energy home management system, and it optimizes home energy efficiency for consumers. So when you look at this little diagram here with the yellow dots, this is actually, it was taken from a live customer's home in beta testing, where the dots represent the energy flow around the system. So the customer has technology, low carbon technologies installed in its home, in their home. They are generating energy through the solar panels. They have what we call a Hub 1, which is a box that Swarm has created that will take the data from the home and optimize it by using the self-generated energy, but also connecting to the grid, drawing on the grid when it needs it. It has the option to leverage the electric vehicle. The car's not actually plugged in on this example, but this home does have one, and so therefore uses it. The battery is used to store the electricity, but then discharge it when it's needed. And why is all of this important? Well, what we've seen through using the algorithms that have been developed as part of this software solution is that energy efficiency measures have been delivered by around 20-25% to homeowners. So consumption reduced, optimizing that energy reduces the cost that the customer is paying, which means that this home can actually reduce its demand but improve its efficiency. So this energy solution allows customers to forget about it. They plug in the box and they go about their day. They tell us when they want their car ready, and the home is optimized in order to deliver what that customer needs. And the learned behavior of the system means that it can start to predict behaviors and trends and patterns for customers, making it entirely easy for them to just heat their home. But not only that, Swarm is VPP ready. So for those of you who are not in the energy world, virtual power plants are aggregated homes that come together that mean that we can sell electricity back to the grid when it's needed. And it automates all of this. So actually, if there are different consumers using energy in different ways, their Swarm Hub 1 will tell us actually what the demand is, what the surplus is, and then the opportunity that they can then use this as a revenue stream within their homes. And by aggregating that demand, not only does the consumer benefit, but the grid benefits. Because potentially, rather than investing in repairs and maintenance of the grid, some of that can be offset and delayed. And that's really interesting because actually we get to a point where we might not be able to do away with the grid entirely, but we can reduce our reliance on it. And that helps us to get to a future energy world where we're not relying on some of those legacy infrastructure solutions. We talked a bit about AI earlier with Justin, and it was interesting to see some of the live examples. I think for me, one of the things that we need to be incredibly mindful of is the potential that AI has to give us benefits. There certainly are huge benefits to be explored. The octopus example is one of those. When I was looking at data points, it took 75 years for the telephone to reach 100 million users. It took 16 years for the mobile phone to reach the same point. It took the internet 7 years to reach 100 million users, and it took ChatGPT 2 months. 2 months to reach 100 million users. So within our businesses, whether we like it or not, our employees are going to be using ChatGPT, and our boards are going to be asking us, what's our sustainability policy? How are our employees using this? And we need to get a hold on it. So there are potential opportunities for better customer experience. I've certainly seen it myself where customer solutions have been optimized by delivering solutions via using AI. But the bit that I worry about is through this proliferation in terms of use of AI, what is the energy impact? Because we're all working flipping hard to try and reduce energy consumption, but yet at the other end, we're all going to adopt AI, and perhaps one of the unintended consequences is we're going to see more energy use. Now, I've chatted to lots of AI experts on this. I'm not an expert at all, but they will tell me that potentially, yes, in the short term, we're going to see an increase in energy use, but over the long term, AI has the potential for us to maybe buy ourselves a little bit more time than 2050 to get to net zero if we deploy it in the right way. The other thing that I worry about is this top one here around discrimination, because I have certainly seen examples where this is the case. Only last week did I ask AI to create an image for me of a boardroom, and I've got an image of a room of men wearing grey suits. They were all white, and one of them stood at the back saying, no. That wasn't the image that I needed for the presentation that I was giving. So it is possible that actually what AI does is learn through the data it receives, and we are trying to challenge biases and deliver solutions that are right and tailored for this world. So there are things that we just need to be mindful of when we're implementing these solutions. I'm going to leave you with a final thought to say, I think Laura had something similar to say around, actually this is happening here and now, and we really need to be thinking about it. So there are plenty of very cool tech companies popping up and developing solutions. I think we need to get into deployment and see if we can get some of these solutions to actually start to make a difference, learn from them. And if we can do that in the right way, then actually the next generation stands a really good chance of being able to deliver on the ambition that we have for net zero. Thank you so much.
Monica, that was wonderful. Thank you very much. And we're all going to look to see how long it takes Swarm to get to its first 100 million users. So look, we're going to now turn to the final panel, which is all around the challenges in the built environment. And it's my pleasure to invite Julie Hill,
who, amongst other things, has a number of roles, not least on the government's Office of Environmental Responsibility, but also as chair of the Institution of Environmental Sciences. And I think, as we did before, we're going to bring some chairs onto the stage. So just stand by for a moment. But Julie, the audience is in your hands.
Okay, I'll wait for the chair. Okay, so I need Danny as well. If we go on stage, thank you. Swerve around there. Thank you. Oh. Thank you. I've not competed with furniture before. Other noise first. Okay. Right, we will try and manfully, womanly rise above the competition from downstairs and hope that we can. So welcome everyone. I'm delighted to see so many of you still wanting to hear about digital and the built environment, especially given everything else that's going on. My name's Julie Hill. I have had now, I'm sobered to say, a nearly 4-decade career in environmental policy and politics. A lot of that now concerned with governance roles. So I've been on the boards of the Eden Project, the Environment Agency, the Consumer Council for Water. I chaired the Waste and Resources Action Programme for 8 years. I'm now, as Trevor has said, on the board of the fairly new still Office for Environmental Protection, our post-EU exit green watchdog, and chair of the Institution of Environmental Sciences. So I guess I've covered the whole gamut really of environmental issues, but I have 3 layers of interest in this topic and things I want to know from our amazing panel. So I guess my first layer of interest is a while ago my other half decided that we would build a house, okay, which is in its closing and quite stressful stages. So I'm actually really glad to be here, not there at the minute. So we're building a house. So that's the personal. The professional is my specialist subject, if I have one, is waste and circular economy. So built environment is a huge component of that, as well as energy. But my third level, I suppose, is the political. And I heard a little bit of Jeremy Hunt earlier and a little bit of a re-quote from Claire Cortino. And I just am starting to have this lurking fear that the net zero project is becoming unravelled politically. And we might talk a bit about that. And that would concern and upset me greatly. And I have to say, collectively, I'm not sure how, between all of us, we failed to get over that low carbon lives will be better lives. And that's the political project. But anyway, that's my political bit. And I think we're going to go to some probably more technical and practical things while we're here. So, to introduce my panel, thank you everyone. So on the far end, Danny Hall is Head of Engineering for the Crown Estate. I said to Danny, do you think Crown Estate self-evident? And it might not be to everyone. Danny, the one-sentence description of the Crown Estate.
So the bit that I'm involved with mainly is Central London. So we have probably almost 200 directly managed assets in Central London, largely down Regent Street and St James's. The wider Crown Estate has a big marine business. The Crown owns the shoreline, basically, so all wind turbines, we lease the seabed to the wind turbine companies, and we have a big rural business and a regional business to boot. But Central London real estate is where I sit.
Okay, so actually much broader than I imagined, I have to say. Next we have Anna. Anna is Global ESG Director for CBRE. In essence, you guys manage buildings, but do you want to add anything to that right now?
Sure. CBRE is the biggest global real estate company in the world, but the part of the business I sit in is data center solutions. So we focus specifically within the data center sector, and we're the biggest operator of data centers in the world. 900 plus data centers. So, yeah.
Okay. So what we heard from Monica earlier, very relevant,
absolutely
upsides, downsides to data and their energy consumption. We may well come back to that. And then Tilly Shaw. Tilly Shaw is Associate Director of Real Estate for Verco. Do you want to give the one sentence description of that role, Tilly?
Sure, yes. So I work across, Verco is a net zero consultancy enabling our clients to transition to net zero in a smooth and hopefully pleasant route. And in the real estate team, we particularly work with real estate portfolios, pension funds, fund managers and so on, lots of buildings, and trying to make sure that there's the engineering expertise and the strategic direction as well.
Okay, thank you very much. And last but not least, Frank Sullivan is CCO of Brainbox AI, and AI specialising in building solutions.
That's right. That's right, indeed.
Okay.
Thank you very much for the invitation. So as a Chief Commercial Officer, I'm the sales guy up here to some degree. Brainbox AI is founded in Montreal. We're 182 strong, 7 years into our commercial journey, and we operate, control, and autonomously manage some 13,000 buildings globally, and a handful of those actually here in central London that we'll talk about going forward. So a technology business built around the use case of artificial intelligence to decarbonize buildings.
Okay, so what I want to do for everyone here is try and have you all paint a picture of what these digital solutions look like and their upsides and downsides. It's really interesting for me coming to this show because I've been going to endless shows about building, and I'm used to seeing bricks and windows and nails and widgets, and all I can see here mainly is screens, which is logical, but I can't necessarily visualize exactly what these solutions are. So I'm going to start by asking each of you to try and put it in context and say, in your roles, what are the biggest net zero challenges you're facing? So what are the biggest, tasks you have to do to get to net zero? And within that, how do you think digital is going to help? How big or small it might be part of the solution is it for you? And just give us a sense of what success looks like. Danny, can I start with you?
Sure. I don't think it's going to be a surprise. The first one is data, isn't it? I think data is a huge problem for everybody, and I don't think it's a big sort of word, data, and everyone goes, oh yeah, that's really difficult. But I think that from our point of view, we're trying to manage our buildings and design and build our buildings in a sort of different way, and start to manage the performance of our buildings in a much more digital way, and enhance that natural feedback that a building can give you. And I think the granularity of data that you need at every level, just to get that rapid response when something goes out of alignment, to integrate the rapid response with a kind of rapid action, I think is incredibly difficult. And I think that amount of data, the sort of management of that data, but also the response and understanding around that data is a huge issue for us. I think leading from that, really, I think culturally, we've got a way to go. I think from people who are designing buildings to people who are looking after buildings, we've been looking at it in a kind of real, it hasn't really changed over the last 50 years in many respects. And I think that has to change. That's the big step for me, where people probably haven't been, had the right skills, probably haven't had the right motivation. We've managed our buildings around a sort of SFG 20 style of management, where it needs to be a much more performance-based management, and take some of the human interaction out of that and make it much more integrated. And I think training as well. Training in the end to make people understand what a digital future looks like, have motivation to manage the building with a digital platform, rather than this kind of hands-on pump grease into pump sort of approach. I think that's what we're wrestling with.
I'm guessing your grand challenges are trying to get probably quite old, leaky, built to not necessarily great construction standards buildings to be more energy efficient, And then, of course, if you make them too airtight, you have ventilation problems, all of that. So do these smart systems really help you understand the building environment so you can get that balance between reducing energy but also keeping a healthy environment?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think the problem that we face at the moment is that we're nowhere near getting to that point. We've got, like I said, about 200 directly managed buildings. We've only got about 100 BMS systems in there, and we go from
building management, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we go from our office at St James's Market, which is cutting edge in building terms. It's never worked how it was meant to work. It's never been managed how we meant it to manage, and therefore it's given us a kind of poor energy result in many ways. And we've spent a long time bringing that back to where we thought it should operate before we can recommission it and start to push on with much more interesting digital solutions. So I think it's, the low-hanging fruit is still out there in terms of just understanding run hours, understand how people want the building to run, getting people to understand what deadbands are. So I think there's loads of low-hanging fruit before we kind of start looking at some of the more healthier opportunities, I think. One of the things that we're working with one of our service providers is creating that digital platform that brings everything together. And that's not only, so what we're trying to get to is a live neighbours rating. So it really uses the metrics and the feedback from we're getting from our buildings to really understand the performance, but also then stretching out perhaps to something akin to kind of a wellness score. But I think we're a little bit further away from that at the moment.
Okay, brilliant. So Anna, are you facing similar challenges? Where would you say your challenges are similar or different, and digital solutions?
Yeah, so probably worth kind of, I joined CBRE 7-8 months ago. Before that, I used to work for one of the biggest food retailers in the country, and I think kind of this different portfolio, but I can see kind of the portfolio level as an end user, similar challenges in terms of not just gathering the right data, getting meaningful insights from the data. So kind of in my previous role, we had like 30,000 submeters, which is not an immaterial amount, getting half-hourly data, which you'd think, oh, brilliant, that you've got all the information you need to optimize your portfolio, but making sense of that data, sometimes too much data can be a hindrance in getting meaningful insights from the noise, which is certainly where AI can drive a lot of value in kind of stepping away from Excel-based or any kind of more rudimentary kind of software solutions to extract value. So I completely empathize with everything you said, and I think it's an industry-wide, not just industry-specific problem. It's kind of a very general issue, and I think that sometimes overcomplicating systems, for sure. Sometimes we try and boil the ocean and maybe put too much in the like automatically controlled, and you might not have the right skill set to be able to make most of it, and then things go on manual rather than auto, and then all your investments down the drain. So there's definitely those concerns there. I think in my current role, the biggest challenge is with everyone automating things and digitalizing the data center sector is starting to consume more and more electricity, for sure. And AI will have a massive impact on that. So data centers already use about 3% of the electricity globally, and the expectation is that by the end of the decade, that could get to about 10%. So huge challenge, but huge opportunity. It's a sector that I think up until very recently has been mostly immune to regulations. It's been a bit of a self-regulating kind of sector, and it's grown so fast. It's not done it with efficiency in mind. Very big margins. You don't really need to worry that much about kind of, bottom line costs. That's changing. Not just from a regulation perspective, kind of the latest version of the EU Energy Efficiency Directive, there's an article dealing specifically with data centers. And it's really funny because for anyone who's been in this space for a long time, when the Energy Efficiency Directive first came over a decade ago, it was a big impact. Everyone was like, well, this is big, this is new. The data center sector is now going like, oh, what's this EU EED? Never heard of it. It's been around for over a decade. They've just not been caught in the net. And that's one of several big pieces of legislation coming. So there's There's a lot to do. There's a lot of opportunity.
But there's a little bit of threat, potentially.
Definitely,
definitely come to Frank in a minute to answer what he thinks those threats might be. But so Tilly, similar challenges, different challenges. What would you pick out as your big challenge and the digital solution, if there is one?
I'd agree with everything that's been said so far. I appreciate that digital has this massive opportunity to help us manage buildings properly. I think we're in a horrible mid-zone at the moment where it's half human and half digital, and that is sort of the worst of both worlds. But we look ahead to that will work out, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But I think for me, particularly in my role, I'm interested in the fact, we have upward of 30 million buildings just in the UK, and we can't. It's going to take some time to get them all up to speed and automated and optimized, and get the passive measures and the air tightness and the ventilation and everything right. We need to move at scale and we need to move at pace. We haven't got time to keep going the same speed we're going. And so one of my core wishes for digital really is that this portfolio level scale look at the built environment, how we can look at whole portfolios at once. We can use data that we've collected from previous audits, from our own experience, and using AI and other algorithms to model what's going to happen across whole entire estates or geographies or kind of collections of buildings. And that is where there's real power, I think. So developing solutions that can model the trajectory to zero across a whole portfolio, can fill in the gaps where the data isn't there yet, and help us to pinpoint the actions, recommend actions where, this building needs a heat pump and this building needs double glazing, and we can do that without having to go and audit every single one and collect data from every single one and install a meter in every single one, because we need all of that, but we haven't got time. We need some answers first. So,
absolutely.
Top-down approach.
I mean, I can remember being very embedded in the sort of first round of environmental monitoring, carbon accounting, and just getting the numbers. Saying, for instance, to a waste management company, how much gas are you using? And they would have to go around 60 separate sites with 60 separate systems to even have an idea. So eventually we're going to get past all that. You'll be able to actually, and this is where Frank can say how this is going to work. You can kind of extrapolate from some types of buildings to others and get that data and get that prioritization, which sounds like what we really need across an estate. What, the low-hanging fruit, do the most impactful things first. Is that what we can look forward to?
I think so. I mean, the number one barrier, picking up on what everyone has said, is get started. Is there an example of, as Danny mentioned, the caliber of the data, and the use cases haven't been necessarily available in the past in order to organize your data. There is the board and the executive team is looking for reaction and use cases of artificial intelligence, generative AI. We've got all this data, using Danny as an example. Why aren't you using more of it? Well, the data is all in different shapes and forms. Half of the building stock, as Danny just mentioned, doesn't even have a building management system. That's fine. That's fine in the old world.
Or a meter, maybe.
Exactly. And that's not going to be the way forward. Yeah. So I think the rates of adoption need to accelerate, number one. AI is a use case, and there's very much an and in the equation. I'm sure there's parallel panels going on today about reglazing and improving the building envelope and making the right concrete decisions as it relates to, quite figuratively, in new construction. Those need to be done, but you don't need to wait for those. The and in the equation is leverage the available data, leverage the available connectivity. People like us are Swiss Army knives. We look at a building and each one is a little different. And then the final area is this notion of scale. It only matters, this impact of what we're all about, only matters if you can impact it at scale. And so our company was very deterministic and intentional about working with retail portfolios in particular, where initially there was some commonality and there was a footprint that could be replicated across hundreds of buildings. And that gave us an opportunity not only to refine our processes, mature the technology, learn, and then apply it to this most challenging environment, which is the buildings around us. And the one thing that they share in common is each one is a little different.
Yeah.
And so start at the beginning is essentially what we're suggesting.
So if we do that and leverage what we've got, what's going to be the result? Is it reduced energy consumption overall? Is it electrification and better use of that?
Yeah.
You know, where you seem to be sort of talking low-hanging fruit from what we've already got, but what's the result look like?
You know, so two aspects. AI is a use case in order to unlock data, its monetization inside of a company and a building, in order to drive all of the organization required to initiate a sustainability program. And energy savings was how we founded our business. And we didn't run it based on a shared energy savings model, but the first promise was, Mr. Customer, I will extract X energy savings and kilowatt reductions. We clearly recognize that the tailwinds are changing. Decarbonization, net zero pledges are of significance, and many customers are now prioritizing decarbonization in lieu of simple energy savings. And if you look at it, sometimes those two are a little different. So I would say, number one, the use case to get started is the dollars that can be rinsed from hot and cold air within your environment. And I think one of the panelists spoke about it very elegantly. The consumer, your associate, the customer, the tenant of your building is never sacrificed. Artificial intelligence is a brilliant tool to handle a multi-threaded equation of energy savings without compromising comfort.
Okay.
So that's
I'm beginning to see this future. Can I ask you all a little bit about policy, as I mentioned, as saying some of the sort of political narrative, unhelpful narratives that's developing around net zero? It's going to be too expensive. We're not ready to get there. I didn't hear Claire Coutinho earlier, but I did hear a bit of Jeremy Hunt downstairs, and I think the presenter re-quoted Claire Coutinho saying net zero has the potential to be crushing business. You know, how would you each respond to that? Is it, I mean, it's clearly not going to crush your business, Frank, but, you know, for the rest, I mean, you know, for instance, Anna, you've got a background in retail. My experience has been that retailers like environmental legislation. They like policy. They're in a competitive environment, and they want everyone to have to do it. You know, how do you think that plays in the built environment?
I think from my retail background, it was an environment where there was a huge amount of business support for it, because usually energy was a big bottom line cost. Mm-hmm. Big energy consumers, especially in food retail with refrigeration, and it just made business sense to invest on projects that would usually deliver 2 to 3 year payback. Why wouldn't you? One, I think, very clear example of where potentially legislation, food retailers have been waiting for legislation to support and so far hasn't, is, for example, putting doors on fridge doors, putting doors on fridges. It's probably one of the only countries in Europe where you don't go to every supermarket and there are doors on your fridges. And there's this reluctance from retailers to put a barrier between the product and the customer. But at the same time, from my previous days, it was the single biggest impact you could do to reduce energy consumption, rather than just letting cold air spill into your aisles, which then customers don't like because it's quite cold and uncomfortable. But there was always this, well, we'll wait until it's legislation, because then we're not going to be the only ones doing it. And if we're the first ones to do it, we might annoy our customers and they'll go to the competitors.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that
level playing field, the level playing field
that
narrative.
And I feel like, I mean, post-Ukraine war and energy crisis, I know my previous employer is now rolling it out as fast as they could, doors and fridges. So sometimes you just need a bit of the stick. The carrot in this case was increased energy prices, but the stick would have gotten us there much faster.
Yeah, and I mean, Danny, from your perspective, you know, where it is the Crown Estate, I imagine, is pretty proactive, but where would policy help on this front? Would it, for instance, enable you to make the argument for investing more in the digital side, for instance, if that's going to be expensive? Does it help justify that expenditure?
I mean, I think we're a slightly peculiar organisation with our kind of ownership model, so difficult to kind of. We're very driven by our chief exec's vision, and I don't know if you understand the complication of our business model, but we're obviously owned by the monarch, but all our profits, if you like, go into the Treasury. So the Treasury is keen, obviously, that we give them as much money as they possibly can. So it's quite an interesting business model in terms of, but the vision is the chief exec's vision in sort of collaboration with the board. And I think our view is that, and I think somebody said it earlier on at the previous meeting, this thing about a kind of net carbon zero future can be a better future, not a worse future. And I think culturally, I don't think people quite get that yet. And I think it has been a bit of a political tool in a way, my own personal opinion. I come from a working class background in Newcastle. And if you ask my friends in Newcastle about net zero carbon, they'll say, oh, it's too expensive. And I think culturally across the country, I think there probably needs to be a bit more positivity behind it. I think, sorry, getting back to the point, legislation's always helped actually. Part L of the building regulations has just kept on pushing and pushing and pushing. I think every time it comes out, the whole consultancy world sort of takes a big deep breath and here we go again. But they solve the problem, they kind of engineer their way out of the problem. So certainly can help, but it needs to be progressive.
Okay, thank you. I need someone to help me keep track of time because I thought there was a clock, but there's not a clock. Trevor, how am I doing for time?
10 minutes.
Okay, good time to open up for questions
Julie,
in that case.
could I chime in just really quickly on the last point?
Yeah.
I don't know if my mic is on.
Mm-hmm.
Is it? Yeah. Okay. Cheers. And to the point, I mean, this is really all about all of us. Sustainability, optimization is good business in any case, and you're trying to optimize every step of your supply chain, your relationships with clients and customers. And it really comes down to a question of the stick or the carrot, I feel. There are jurisdictions across the globe, in Europe and in North America, where there are incentives to accelerate your decarbonization. And then at the other hand, pending legislation that is going to create limits for decarbonization with significant penalties. I think of New York City in particular, where it'll be very expensive. So get ahead of those, seek the incentives that are available. It's good business.
Yeah. Just going to. Okay, questions. I think I like this theme of how do we incentivize retrofit, for instance. Right. Sorry, hand over there, or oh right, okay. You have the mic.
Hello. Thank you very much for your insights.
You might have to really shout.
Moving from a more kind of operational carbon to embodied carbon, I'd be interested in the panel's thoughts on circularity in the built environment. How can we shift to seeing the built environment as a bank of resources rather than an obstacle that needs to be demolished to make way for new building? How can we design for reuse and recycling? What are the barriers to that? What opportunities do you see in that? All that kind of thing, please.
Yeah, completely agree. The greenest building is the one we already have, it is said. Tilly, do you want to have a go at that?
Yeah, really good point. And can you hear me?
Yeah.
Good point. I think there's a little bit of maturity required in the carbon accounting systems that we have currently to move away from the classic point-in-time spot check of how much carbon have you emitted in a 12-month period, to moving towards carbon budgets and also carbon balance sheets, as it were, to understand what your stock of carbon is in your building stock, and to be able to take that out, use it, reuse it, add, take away, and to just have a much more refined sense of how we're actually accounting for our emissions, because especially in the built environment, 100 years is not, or should not be all that long. It's not that many building lifetimes, even with modern buildings. And we definitely need a better way of looking at what's being stored and what's being released and what's being reused.
Yeah,
can I just pick up on that? Because I think it's a really important question. And I think as the grid gets decarbonised, which eventually it will, the carbon problem will be the embodied carbon. So it's a really significant problem. I think going back to the legislation thing, that's happening already, particularly in Westminster, some of the bigger boroughs around London. They're kind of regeneration policies are actually significant. And there's some pretty good examples of that around town at the moment, actually. From our point of view, being a kind of development group, really, we're taking it incredibly seriously. We've given ourselves internal targets to achieve, and when we don't hit them hurdle rates, it goes back into review, and sometimes you have to pay penalties internally for that. So we're taking it hugely seriously. And reuse, of course, we've got a 250-year-old estate. We've invested a lot of carbon in it already. How do you kind of... and to be fair, some of the stone and marble that we put in 150 years ago, you want to keep that, right? I mean, that's heritage stuff. So our new builds, though, are under huge pressure to reduce their embodied carbon and also start to think about getting away from construction, getting more into production.
Yeah.
So you kind of standardize construction techniques, modern methods of construction, and then being able to deassemble rather than demolish. So I think it's a huge question.
Yeah,
hugely important.
absolutely. Especially is it right? New builds only about 10% of our each year our housing stock. So we've got to take account of the embodied carbon of what we have. I think question over there.
Thank you. Hi. Neil Harris from Arup. I'm looking for some top tips. I really love the point about circularity and building design and construction. Moving on from that, embedded operational carbon. We've been collecting some really sort of interesting operational energy performance data from buildings. But I'm looking for top tips. How can we attract the financial services, finance community to invest in these retrofits and improvement programs? So any thoughts on that? Is there a way in which we should shape or present the data that we have or the investment case that we have to the financial markets?
Okay. Is that part of your brief, Frank, to help
it
investment?
Is. I think I heard a portion of the question.
Yeah.
In the Canadian marketplace, for example, the Canadian Investment Bank has set aside $2 billion to upgrade the building stock where appropriate. Here's what they didn't do. They didn't come to the market initially with a digital upgrade, or some of that to be not just to be poured in new concrete or new glazing, which should be done, but I think all of us collectively, including those that manage those key buildings, should make sure that there's an and in the equation. Companies like us can advocate appropriately, but it takes a collective in order to make it. So doing both, I think, is prime versus doing one.
I mean, it should enable a better understanding of returns, I'd imagine, once you have these smart systems and returns on the renewable investment as well.
The returns are in a fraction of the time, and they're sustainable clearly as long as the digital solution is there. But a retrofit in today's dollars, 12, 24, 36 months, at 10 to 20 to 30 million Canadian dollars, US dollars, or equivalent here in pounds, that takes time. If you're looking for inertia, do both.
Okay, other questions? Anything else on... I thought Laura's presentation, for those who were here, about dispersed generation was particularly interesting. So for my sins, one of the things I've done connected to a building project is take the course in energy assessment. And it's very clear you can get your grade up just by sticking usually just 2 solar panels on a building. Everyone's nodding. I'm glad to say I've got 17. But it's quite a long payback. And I'm probably the second person in the village to have solar installation. Why is this? I don't know if anyone can comment in the audience. Have we failed on the incentives? Have we failed on the knowledge? Why is this dispersed generation model that Laura was talking about not yet come to pass, and will it? Anyone here who has any insight on that in the audience? If not, I'm going to ask the panel. You've had your chance. Anyone care to comment on that?
Well, you talked earlier about policy and what is and isn't being done, and I do think there's a couple of things there that, although, Part L and possible Part Z, and lots of things moving in the right direction, lots of implications, but there is still a bit of a lack of ambition on the policy side, and definitely in terms of messaging to both homeowners and occupiers and non-domestic occupiers, there's a real gap there in terms of incentive and making it clear what the benefits are
and making it easy.
Making it easy,
well.
yeah.
Okay.
There's been so much back and forth, and there's a grant, but there isn't, and you can get a new boiler, but you can't, and X, Y, Z. It's just made it very, very complicated, and obviously that point's been made many times before, but we need some
I
straightforward.
failed at the first hurdle on the heat pump form.
Yes,
basically. Yeah. So, okay. It's looking like over there we're pretty much out of time. But I'm just in closing, and I'm not going to attempt to sum up, I'm afraid. But just in closing, I'd like each of you to give your sort of digital top tip, as it were. So for the audience members, if they're going to go away and consider sort of one foray into, using some of these solutions, what would you suggest it is, Frank?
Get started. Don't seek perfection,
Right.
and the journey is more important than the hope of beginning.
Okay, that sounds very zen. Tilly.
Good. Can I cheapen the whole event by mentioning a plug for our new platform?
Why not?
After that very zen comment. So Verco is launching a platform called MyVerco, myverco.com, and it will be pulling together all the data that you have from your buildings, as well as filling in the gaps and helping with that strategic target setting piece. So really excited to see that come out, because I think that's going to answer a lot of the questions.
Okay, brilliant. Anna?
Probably a bit of a contentious one, and maybe putting myself out of a job in a decade or so, but I think we tend to want to digitalize everything, and we think, it's just going on the cloud, it's not my direct emissions, but it's essentially the data center sector kind of absorbing all of those emissions. So maybe have a think about, do you need to take 70,000 pictures of what you had for lunch and, store it in the cloud and send it to all of your friends? Because it might seem small, but every time you upload a picture, you download something, there is a carbon footprint associated with that.
Yeah, I'm conscious we didn't tackle that one. I'm hoping maybe part of the answer is some sort of rule that says all data centres must be run on renewable energy. But I know that's only part of the answer. But it's clearly a dilemma that we didn't go into, but for everyone to take away. Danny, your one-sentence top tip.
One sentence. Well, this month, we had our first AI success in-field, where we were monitoring the temperature variation and the vibration variation on a pump. And we're able to predict failure on that pump before it failed.
Ooh.
So we replaced the bearing, not the pump, which we would have just pulled the pump out and replaced it in a mad panic previous to that, once it had failed. And that was part of a long-term vision. So I would say, have a vision, deliver the vision.
Excellent. Okay, well, that's a really good note to end on. Thank you all very much. Can I ask everyone to thank our panel? And I think if we exit that way, Trevor's going to do some closing. Thank you, everyone.
Julie and panel, thank you very much. Wonderful. And so I'm just going to again say a big thank you to yourselves for attending today, and of course to our panelists and other speakers. And I think I'm going to give the final word and challenge to Dave Worthington to sum up, and then also to Roy, who you heard from at the beginning, just to close the event. So Dave, over to you.
Thank you, Trevor, and panelists. And what a challenge to sum up what's been an incredibly interesting and diverse range of talks and panel discussions. So just a few points to kind of pull together some of the themes that I picked up from this afternoon. So firstly, we kicked off with Lauren talking about the power of the consumer. So obviously we're all people, we all live our lives and we emit carbon and we have choices, and we talked about our fridges being part of the national energy storage infrastructure, and also how much collectively we could achieve if we all installed solar panels on our house and replicated what happens in South Australia, where they've got to 100% of decentralized generation. And there was also an evidence of power of the consumer later, talking about us demanding more from our pensions and the most sustainable options being more readily available. And there was talk of shared value models and the potential for these, so we could all get a greater share of what we're doing. So we get paid for the avoided energy losses in the transmission and distribution infrastructure. We also get paid for being more active and the reduction in costs of healthcare that generates. And then clearly there's lots today around technology either acting for us and optimizing things on our behalf, whether that's building optimization or our domestic energy systems, but also technology giving us the data that we need to act. Technology doing the heavy lifting, but giving us the information so that we can change what we do in our businesses and in our homes. Really interesting stats around the potential for AI reducing 10% of global emissions, that being similar to Europe, but also later Anna just mentioning that data centers by 2030 could consume 10% of global energy. So we've really got to watch that we get that balance right, and the data hungry systems are decarbonized. And just all of the AI solutions that are coming forward are allowing us to avoid flooding, to book more sustainable hotels, to shift data consumption where the renewable energy is. So all really exciting stuff. But then we had a bit of a reality check in the last session that there is some still difficult problems to solve. Still lots of data issues, potential political headwinds, the challenge of scaling solutions, particularly in the built environment when every building is different. But we need the right mix of carrots and sticks. And ultimately, sustainability is good business and low carbon lives are better lives. So I'll leave it there. Over to Roy with some closing remarks. Thanks, Roy.
Thank you, Dave. All right, so I have the easy part. So I just need to tell you that I would like to thank you on behalf of BIP and Verco for coming over today, and to thank all of our speakers and panelists for being here and sharing their experience and history in the transition into net zero. We have a networking event just on the right with food and drink, so you're welcome to join us. And last, George and Tonino, thank you very much for pulling this event together. It's been a lot of work.
Yeah.
And finally, to the man that orchestrates, got everything together, Trevor, thank you so much for leading this. All right, so thank you again, and looking forward to collaborate and talk through the networking.
Excellent. Monica, could I have a copy of